Welcome back to Central Colorado Ballistics. My name is Wally. If this is your first time here, thanks for taking a few minutes to join the conversation. This channel exists to talk about firearms, firearms rights, and responsibility, from the range to the recording room, but more importantly, to talk about why these conversations still matter. Not just in America, not just in my state, but globally. This isn't about yelling into an echo chamber. This is about asking questions that don't always have easy answers and being honest enough to sit with them. A little about me, so you know where I'm coming from. Again, I'm a veteran. I grew up around firearms, hunting, target shooting, learning safety early, and being taught that firearms weren't toys or symbols, but tools that required discipline and respect. For most of my life, owning firearms felt normal, not political, not controversial, just a part of life. Because of that, I'll be honest, I didn't always understand the struggle people face in other parts of the world where firearm ownership isn't a right, or where it's outright forbidden. That understanding didn't come from one moment. It came from watching history, watching governments, and watching what happens when the balance of power becomes one-sided. When you look globally, there are entire populations who have no legal means to defend themselves, no lawful way to resist abuse, no meaningful check on authority if the government decides it no longer serves the people. And here's the important part. This isn't about saying every government without civilian firearm ownership is evil. That's too easy, and frankly, too lazy. The real question is, what happens when the government fails? Because history shows us they eventually do. When civilians have no means of defense, no leverage, no ability to resist force with force, power consolidates quickly. And once that happens, corruption doesn't need permission. It just needs opportunity. So the conversation isn't guns good or guns bad. The conversation is about balance. So what? Why does that matter to someone just trying to live their life, raise a family, or stay out of politics altogether? Because rights that exist only on paper are fragile, and rights that depend entirely on government goodwill are temporary. Firearm rights, globally speaking, aren't about violence. They're about deterrence. They're about ensuring that power never becomes so centralized that people have no voice left except obedience. Now let's bring this conversation home to the United States. The Second Amendment isn't an accident. It wasn't written in a vacuum, and it wasn't about hunting season or sport shooting, though those are important cultural elements. It was written by people who had just lived through government overreach, people who understood that freedom isn't self-sustaining, that it requires responsibility, accountability, and yes, sometimes uncomfortable safeguards. But here's where I think we lose the conversation today. Too often we treat the Second Amendment as either sacred and untouchable or dangerous and outdated. And neither extreme leaves room for understanding. If a right exists but is slowly regulated into irrelevance, does it still function as a right, or is it just a permission slip? At the state level, this gets even more complicated. Laws vary wildly. What's legal in one state can make you a criminal in another. Responsible gun owners, people who train, follow the law, and prioritize safety are often caught navigating a maze of regulations that change based on zip code. And again, the question isn't should there be rules? Of course there should be. The real question is, do those rules meaningfully improve safety? Or do they primarily restrict access for people who were already doing the right thing? That's not a rhetorical question. That's a conversation worth having. Let me be clear about something. Firearm rights and firearm responsibility are inseparable. You don't get one without the other. Safety, training, accountability, and respect for the tool, those aren't optional. They're foundational. And ignoring that reality hurts everyone involved. This channel will always acknowledge that firearms carry serious responsibility. That discussion doesn't weaken the Second Amendment, it strengthens it. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with questions, not slogans. How do we protect individual rights while addressing real-world safety concerns? How do we learn from global examples without pretending America is the same as everywhere else? And how do we keep this conversation open without turning it into a fight? Because once conversation stops, decisions still get made, just without you. This channel isn't here to tell you what to think. It's here to ask why we think what we think, and whether it still holds up. If you agree, great. If you disagree, that is fine too. Just be willing to talk. Thanks for being here. Thanks for starting the conversation with me. I'm looking forward to learning alongside with you. Freedom secured, rights defended.